Hey everybody, we're here again with another episode of Pioneering Modern. Just me and Scratch with you today. Joe is taking this week off, but we have a lot of interesting conversation to bring you. Scratch recently competed in a massive tournament in Copenhagen, and I recently tried to qualify with a spicy deck in the Pioneer ManaTraders event. But we're gonna go ahead and talk about Copenhagen first, and let's talk to Scratch. What's up, Scratch? How you doing?
I'm doing great. It's it's a great day. I'm feeling good. I have finally, I've recovered from the entire event in Copenhagen. Sadly, didn't make it all the way. I was a bit down on that, but once you get over it, you get back up, and got to get the drive to get going for the next event.
Absolutely. I'm doing great. I'm enjoying what I'm doing in Modern. I'm putting a lot of work into that deck and kind of cultivating a sideboard guide, but I did have a lot of fun in my little break from Modern and Pioneer on the ManaTraders series, so excited to talk about that too. You wanna what'd you end up playing, and how'd you do in Copenhagen?
I ended up playing just spec control in Copenhagen, and I very much liked the deck. I think the list was great. I did a lot of changes in the last couple of days before I finally, went to submit my list. I think it was unfortunate I had a camping trip before then, because I kind of didn't have like the 2 weeks prior to that, so I had less time in that kind of a sense to really finalize my list, and I didn't get enough testing in to realize that maybe I was running one too many big tests and maybe could have cut 8 Wandering Emperor. The Emperor I feel a little bit less confident on saying maybe cutting, but the big TEF should have been one less, just one big TEF. But it's the way the cookie crumbled. I did play it that way, and you learn your lesson in one way or another.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a pretty good time. Also had fun. It was a bit unfortunate in some of the matchups. I got a bit unlucky against Murktide. My opponent had Jace twice. I couldn't do it because I pretended to not let them have it. I didn't expect them to have it both games because my hand was just better off beating them if they didn't have it, and so I had to play in such ways that I did kind of play into the Jace. But I wasn't expecting with almost no cantripping and a one of in the 60 card deck post board. I wasn't expecting them to have Jace both games, so I kind of just lost to that. But not much you can do about it. But more importantly, I lost this is what kind of just killed the tournament for me, is I went up against the scam deck twice in a row. I went, I was at that point 1-3, and it was basically just over for me with the tournament. I decided to, end up playing all the matches because, I paid money for the tournament. I'm gonna spend my time playing the game. And then I met some very awesome people during the tournament. One of the nicer people, I met Lee, which was a good friend of ours who I played with online for, I'd say, roughly 2.5, 3 years. I couldn't give it a good, but we played a lot and we know each other quite well over online. Finally was able to meet him face to face first time. Joe wasn't able to make it, sadly, but would have been awesome if Joe was also there. But I'll take it the way it was. Also, I was able to. I also was able to meet someone from the Will Hall Discord server named Stencil. Awesome fellow. He also spoke German. He's from Switzerland apparently, so his German accent was especially his English accent. Through that Swiss German accent was very hard, and then his German accent was a lot more understandable for me. So I had an easier time speaking German to him than English, so it was a lot easier to talk to him whenever Lee wasn't around, because then we'd all just talk German.
Nice.
And I also met from the commentary team. I didn't meet Harry. I saw Harry at the event, but I never was able to approach him because Harry was doing other things, as she would. But I was able to meet Philippa and Will Hall, which were the other two commentary people.
Nice.
And I can definitely say both of them were awesome to meet, and they're very nice people.
Fantastic. Excellent. It's always good to see the personalities behind the camera match the personalities on camera.
Oh yeah, no, Will was definitely he was a lot more joking than Philippa was definitely. Had some more sarcastic comments to say, but I was definitely a very fun person to meet.
Excellent. Well, I've got the deck list you played on the screen for the viewers and listeners, so if you want to go over that at all, or...
Yeah, this is one of my favorite lists. If I'm not playing Blue Red Kiki, which I'm currently on, this is the Jeskai list I went for. As I said, I think one big tip to many because I started bringing in more and more memory deluges because of the very good cards, and I kind of just overdid it, and then I had a lot too many just because the problem with having big tip and deluges in hand is a lot of times your hand doesn't do anything on those big turns. And so you end up just having a do-nothing hand, and your opponent might resolve a big threat, and you weren't able to do anything about it because you didn't have a removal spell or anything. So that's why it's always good to have a little less of those, and maybe just have just 2 deluges, 1 tep, or maybe just 2 deluges, no teps at all. It's something you have to figure out and do testing. I can't, without having done the testing, I can't really definitively say what and what not. But overall, that's the kind of the payoffs in the deck. And then I chose this list because of the bolts and the opts. It's just some more, early game able to just deal with the stuff, and then also just be able to. I just feel a lot more comfortable playing these kind of bolts lists where you know how to, as one who's played bolt for so many years, I feel very just comfortable using bolt and having access to it, and so that's why I chose it over a chalice build. And that's basically the list I went for. Also, I realized I should have definitely been on the 2 Flusterstorms. I went down to 1 Flusterstorm. I definitely regretted this, and I'm not making that mistake again because I've always been on 2 Flusterstorms, and I very recently went down to 1 Flusterstorm, and I think that was a big mistake, and I think I've learned my lesson on why I've always been playing 2 Flusterstorms in Modern. I've been playing them since MH1, and so I'm a big fan of Flusterstorm. I prefer it over Mystical Dispute, in my opinion, but everyone can have their own opinion on what kind of 1-mana counterspell that they want in their lists, but I definitely very much prefer Flusterstorm.
Yeah, I'm currently rocking in my Indomitable Creativity deck a mix of Flusterstorm, Mystical Dispute, and I actually have a Spell Pierce in the board because I'm also playing 2 in the main deck.
Yeah,
I think for that deck, it just... Since it has more combo implications than a lot of the slower, I don't want to call my deck a control deck because it's not quite that. It's more of like a tempo combo deck.
I'd say you could maybe argue more for like a mid-range combo deck because you are running some number of removal spells, discard spells. But
yeah,
it's definitely more of a combo deck, you could say, than anything else.
Yeah, but even though I'm still like in very much agreement with you that Flusterstorm is probably the premier level spell as far as sideboard goes.
Yeah, it just deals with a lot of important things. Because sometimes, especially like as a blue, maybe it could have just been what I think is very important in a Kiki deck. Just a lot of times you just have some very important instants and sorceries from your opponent that you just want to counter. Just if you're able to deal with it on 1 mana and they can't do anything about it, it really just is able to help you out and just gain you either the tempo or just the advantage in the game. Because sometimes you want to resolve a threat, or they are trying to resolve a threat. You counterspell and they go, I got counter backup, and then you say, no, I got Flusterstorm. You got just the ability to protect and deny is just so important that I think Flusterstorm also being able to hate on the Cascade decks is just something I can't give up.
Absolutely. And the Cascade decks and the Red-Black Scam deck you've mentioned earlier, the 2 decks that I have been been getting got by recently. So they are definitely a couple of decks that really need some attention and to be prepared for if you're stepping out into the modern world.
I'm gonna point out the very important thing is if you're playing against Scam on the draw, side out those Flusterstorms. There's no reason on earth to bring those in. On the play, you can bring them in because if you have Bolt plus Flusterstorm, or let's say you're running kind of like a Murktide deck, I don't know, like if you got any 1-mana removal spell plus Flusterstorm, you can then make them have to, grief you, and then they can choose. Sometimes they just don't reanimate it or just go for the reanimation spell on the grief. If they don't want to do it, their choice. But it's just very important that you're able to answer it. But on the draw, if they turn one grief you and leave you with a Flusterstorm, like 99% of the time, it's going to be a dead card for the rest of the game.
Yeah.
So there's no reason to have it on the draw. Like, there's literally no reason. I also really dislike it on the play, but that is everyone can make their own opinion on it on the play, but definitely do not bring it in on the draw.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I've seen in Modern as of late is that there has been this kind of shift towards creatures over the last few years being the more powerful and the more premier spell, especially with the printing of the incarnations.
Yes.
Giving us free creature spells has completely devalued cards like Negate and just made them less appealing as options coming from the sideboard. You don't want to spend 2 mana on that sort of effect. So if that effect is desired, Flusterstorm kind of fills that role because it is that 1 mana spell, allowing you to keep your game plan going in a lot of cases where you wouldn't normally be able to.
Yeah, because, like the decks I play, you can very easily lose to a Veil of Summer. Veil of Summer is just one of those cards. They draw a card, they have resolved their threat, you're down a counterspell, you're really in a bad situation. But if you go counterspell, they go Veil of Summer, and you have Flusterstorm.
Mm-hmm.
The entire game just changes, because their Veil of Summer is countered. I mean, I really hate Veil of Summer. I wish that card got banned. That's my opinion. I really have a very much hate for that card. Like, everyone can have their own opinion on cards. My hatred towards it, but it's one of those cards that you have to counter, and Flusterstorm's just at its 1 mana is just really helpful.
Yeah, absolutely, and it can hit any any instant or sorcery. It doesn't have the restriction of being a blue spell like Mystical Dispute does, where
yes.
Sometimes you have to pay 3 mana for Mystical Dispute, so like.
Yeah, but also very important about Flusterstorm is it's a storm spell. So if you run opts in your list, sometimes I have had my opponents just be like, I'll do this, and sometimes they'll just be like, opt in response, Flusterstorm, get the count up, or Snapcaster Mage, opt Flusterstorm. Really get that count up. So Flusterstorm is just one of the more flexible ones, and from my experience, whenever you try to resolve a threat, Flusterstorm's always going to be a mana leak. And as a combo deck, as Blue-Red Kiki, you always wanted the mana leak over, the Spell Pierce being always a Spell Pierce. Maybe being more versatile and getting Planeswalkers as well.
Yeah.
But the mana leak is just 10 times better than anything the Spell Pierce would provide in most of those decks.
Yeah, and a lot of the times when people are interacting with Kiki, they're interacting at instant speed. So that is, you're automatically going to be looking at instants to find your answers. So Flusterstorm is just a clean, easy, gotcha in a lot of cases.
I was going to also talk a little bit more about the event, because I think we touched on the deck a bit. But
yeah.
The event, kind of the more important one.
Absolutely.
The deck was also important, but the event.
No, because this was like your first larger event, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's my actual first one.
Yeah, so I definitely want to hear about how you felt about it, because it's been many moons since my first big event. So
my biggest event prior to that was the Theros Beyond Death 2-headed draft I did with my brother. So,
quite a stark difference.
Yeah, I was gonna say just a couple more people.
Just a few.
Just a couple more judges as well. We had one judge in comparison to the multiple judges there, but so overall the event, I noticed one big thing: Shadow was non-existent, almost is what it felt like, which makes me happy. As Blue-Red, you hate facing Shadow, so the less Shadow, the better. Also, I had to say one critique I kind of have to say about that event is the side events were just hella expensive. It felt. I did a couple of drafts. It cost me a lot of money because they were 20 euros a draft. And there was almost very little prize support, and it was just very poorly run because it didn't feel like a long draft, because it was like, yeah, you players have to do it yourself. Here you get some booster packs for winning. You only basically play 2 games post drafting. It's a single elimination event, and to me it felt super bad because it's just like basically you started the draft and it didn't even take, it felt like 1 hour for you to be done with the entire draft experience.
Yeah.
And that didn't sit right with me. The Commander Legends draft I did at the end was the only most refreshing one I had because just the game went long. Everyone was super nice. It was just a lot of fun games. So I really enjoyed the Commander Legends draft they had there, but the the Streets of New Capenna draft, because that's the only thing other than Commander Legends draft they had was always Streets of New Capenna. I did it twice, had a lot of fun, but that was just more than enough for me.
In comparison, like one of my first events, they were doing pods of commander. Some of the most fun was like setting up pods where it was like me and a buddy of mine against 2 or 3 other people that were just complete strangers and setting up and just hanging out. And
yeah,
I feel like the draft experience also is a lot more fun when you've got a couple of your friends there who have added to the pod, and there's a couple of other friends, and you can kind of like.
I don't think that is as much of an important thing, having friends, because the players there are really like a lot of the players are really nice and just fun to hang out with as well, because we all have one very big interest in common when we go to these events. But I just felt like I kind of wanted more games, because at some point, because some of the players after the draft, they were like, okay, we didn't win anything, but we are wanting to. We wanted to play games. We're not spending 20 euros for nothing.
Yeah.
So they went and was like, hey, I got the draft deck still here. You want to play? And we just played some games on the side. Nothing on the line, but it's just like we played those games because we hadn't like there was nothing else that we it was just what else were we gonna do? And it felt correct, but it felt sad that we had to on our own kind of make this go on the side. Where the event organizers were just like, yeah, we don't care. Felt a bit like I said, felt a bit bad.
Okay. Yeah. If the focus on the side events isn't as if the side events aren't as cultivated in their play experience, it definitely shows. Like if there's more focus on making sure that the main event is good than there is on making sure that the side event is just as fun, or any of the side events are just as fun. I can see that experience being a little bit meh.
The event was fun to go to, but I recommend the main event, not the side event.
So give me a number out of 10 on how you enjoyed your Copenhagen event.
So if I would have rated this the night after I lost so bitterly against Scam, it would have been a 2 out of 10. But overall, I'd say somewhere around 6, maybe 7. I would give it. I think the MPG melee usage, even though a lot of players complained about it, was so smooth. I always got a text from MPG melee where my next round was. I didn't even have to open up I didn't even have to log in, open up MPG melee at all when I was at Copenhagen. All I had to do was look at my phone, bing, message. I knew where I had to go. It sent me my table number. It told me which opponent I was playing against. All in text message. Because again, you can set that up on MTG Melee.
Yeah.
Especially because Copenhagen still is within the EU. So because Denmark's in the EU, I have no I don't have to pay for being outside of any. I'm not outside the EU, so I don't have to pay extra for anything. So it's just very simple. Get my text message. I know where I'm going. Everything's super. It was super smoothly run because of MTG Melee. I had not to look up is there a list?
Yeah.
Nothing in that. It just said table number, opponent, and that's it. It was just a dream on that end. And overall, yeah, I have to rate it that really high. The main event was super nice in that sense. Mm-hmm. The side events were a bit lackluster because it felt like they just kind of just handed you the booster packs and said, play your own game. But overall, I think it was just a very nice event. I found some very nice, the vendors were also nice. I was able to buy some cards off of there. And yeah, definitely. I would say 6 out of 7 overall, but the main event I'd give 8 out of 10 maybe.
Fantastic. Maybe. That's good news. And so you'd definitely go again?
I would go again with Blue Red Kiki. Especially, now that Shadow is on the decline. Mm-hmm. That was literally without a doubt, I think if not one of the worst matchups, just the worst matchup. it was definitely a really bad matchup.
Mm-hmm.
And with Shadow on such a decline, I saw one Shadow deck in the event. I'm certain there were like maybe one or like a couple more, but I faced only against one Shadow deck. And if I would have only faced against one Shadow deck
Yeah.
in that event, I would have snap played Blue-Red Kiki because I only didn't play it because at the time I was wanting to not play it, was where there was a lot more Shadow. And I decided to move to Jeskai about 1 to 2 months in advance just so I could really get into the deck. And so that was sadly an unfortunate change of events. But if this is going on still, I would definitely go to this event again with Blue Red Kiki. This is modern. Now we got to pioneer some other things.
Absolutely. We're looking to blaze some trails and see where that format's going after it has had a couple of powerful cards added to it. But before those came out this past weekend, Pioneer was the subject of the ManaTraders series. I don't know if any of y'all are familiar with the ManaTraders series. I know Scratch is. But they do... they pick a format every month, and they do a bunch of different qualifier rounds within a certain time frame. And if you have a certain record coming out of that, you make it to the Swiss event at the end of the month. And from there into the playoffs the next day, and potentially as a W. They do live coverage of the event through their YouTube I think through their Twitch channel. So it's definitely worth qualifying if you are a ManaTraders subscriber, because the prize pool is ginormous as long as you're a ManaTraders subscriber. It's worth it to sign up for that weekend or that month. Yeah, and then cancel the subscription, because the prize pool, it nearly like triples for you just being a subscriber for that 1 month. If you think you've got a good shot, it's worth the investment.
I mean, if you're needing to rent a deck, if you desire the renting of decks anyways, I would just recommend using any kind of product. And if you're gonna triple your prize support anyways, going to these events, makes sense to then use that. Otherwise, you could just theoretically, I'm not sure how big of a subscription you would need, but theoretically you could buy the deck and just have like the cheapest subscription possible and just get the biggest prize support, and then you just cancel the subscription again and just open up and cancel. Exactly.
If you already have your deck. But I've been a ManaTraders customer for a couple of years now, thanks to the stream. Since I play a lot of different kinds of decks there, I like being able to rent whatever whenever, so it is just a cherry on top for me that the prize pool is near triple for me, because I like playing a variety of things. I know I'm kind of our channel's combo person, but that's kind of why I leaned into the deck that I played, because it's kind of a combo. I just put it on the screen for us. It is the Green Devotion Pioneer deck. This one is rocking Vraska instead of the Teferi, who slows the sunset, that has been more popular as of late. But it's just your basic Green Devotion deck with Nykthos. We've got Llanowar Elves and Elvish Mystic to start us out and get us ramping. Hit us 3 mana as soon as possible, because Wild Growth Troll is going to be how we end up getting Nykthos profitable.
You mean Old Growth Troll?
Oh yeah, Old Growth Troll. What did I say?
Wild Growth Troll. I mean, it's a pretty wild card still, but like.
All right, Scratch. I want you to look up the card Wild Growth real quick.
Wild Growth. Okay, yeah. No, this kind of reminds me a bit of the good old fashioned Utopia Sprawl, but just a bit not as good.
Yeah. Now, what does Old Growth Troll do when he dies?
Old Growth Troll, when he dies, has an effect that he, if it was a creature attached to an arm force you control, has add 2 green. Okay, so you can add an additional green.
It's a little homage to the old Wild Growth.
I can understand that.
Yeah. So I just wanted to point that out, because that's kind of why I had the little slip there. But yeah, Old Growth Troll, having the 3 devotion to green, those 3 pips, is why Nykthos really enjoys putting that Elvish Mystic or that Llanowar Elves out on turn 1 and getting into this as soon as possible.
Yeah, I can see that,
From there, we try to use our planeswalkers in some combination, Kiora, Karn, and Vraska, to set up as much mana from Nykthos as we can get to afford putting Ugin's Nexus on the battlefield through Karn, sacrificing it with Vraska, taking an extra turn, all while using the Chain Veil with Kiora, tapping, untapping, to keep activating our planeswalkers until, we win the game. Vraska's plus ability is what we're using to sacrifice the Ugin's Nexus for the extra turn. So not long after we take a few turns, Vraska's going to hit their ultimate, and we'll be able to attack and deal combat damage to a player so that they lose the game. That's essentially the nuts and bolts. Cavalier of Thorns is kind of the creature that ties the room together, going and getting Nykthos from the top 5 cards of your library and putting it onto the battlefield. Mm-hmm. And Storm the Festival is phenomenal. It's our collected company, but we can get planeswalkers out of it. This deck doesn't have a difficult time getting to its end game if it can make it through the first 2-3 turns.
Can't you also grab lands with Storm the Festival?
Absolutely.
I think that could also be a very, very important thing.
Absolutely, especially if you can filter your mana through Nykthos. You end up getting a couple of Nykthoses going that just rockets your mana production up even further. So it's not uncommon to cast a Storm the Festival and then flash it back in the same turn if you've got your mana production rolling.
Oh god.
Yeah, no, it gets absurd. That's 16 mana. That's 16 mana, especially if you've lost an old growth troll, because when it comes back, it still counts the 3 pips.
Oh wow.
When it's an enchantment.
Oh yeah, because it's an enchantment. Yeah, it's not phased out or an exile.
Nope, it's still physically that card. It just changes into an enchantment. So you're still getting the 3 pips worth of devotion through that.
But you could technically, if someone had destroyed target enchantment, you could kill it then.
Absolutely, yes. Absolutely.
Okay. I did not know that.
Yeah, but this deck is just super powerful, super consistent. Oath of Nissa also helps maintain the consistency and is kind of how we're even able to afford cards like Vraska in a deck where we are barely even splashing black. I mean, we do have Overgrown Tombs, Llanowar Wastes, and Blooming Marsh is in the deck, but really Oath of Nissa is how we're being able to cast our Vraskas more often than not.
Yeah, also I have to say one very important thing about it is it also improves the devotion, which has always been one of the more important parts about the card. Just finding Nykthos, improving the devotion. It's an insane card in that deck.
Absolutely. A brainstorm that, furthers the game plan besides being that is just like nuts. The more important thing about this deck is it's just fun. It is just absolutely fun. When you get rolling, there's so many different decisions you can make. Like, what do I take off the Cavalier? Do I stop comboing now? Should I go for combo now? Am I going to get disrupted? How many times can I use Kiora before it dies? Like, there's a lot going on that isn't surface level knowledge here. So you can get into some crazy lines. Like, maybe you don't have Vraska to be able to go off, but you have a ton of mana production. So you lean into Lair of the Hydra and just make a massive creature land and get in there that way. So, like, a lot of cool different ways you can approach this game with this deck. The sideboard being a Karn Wish board does limit how many things you can run besides those sorts of targets. Fatal Push and Abrupt Decay are premier spells in the format right now. Especially against things that this deck doesn't enjoy seeing. Fatal Push and Abrupt Decay take care of those hyper-aggressive red decks because they're using those creatures to apply as much pressure as possible, and if we don't hit an old growth troll on 2, we're already behind. And bolting the bird is a real thing from them, so we're going to be playing from behind there, so Fatal Push and Abrupt Decay help a lot.
Also, I like the multi-format all-star Meteor Golem.
Yeah, Meteor Golem actually came up quite a few times.
You know, it's if you can cast it, it's a good card.
Mm-hmm.
If you can't cast it, it's a terrible card.
Yeah. Like there have been a lot of times where I'm like, oh, Hail Mary, I've got to play Karn now so that I can answer that really big threat across from me. It's usually like a giant Sprite Dragon or something like that, something that starts off small but gets out of control because we don't have a whole lot of interaction. But we're usually able to get to that mana just in time, answer whatever threat, and still have that 3/3. Most of the time, though, if we're still doing all right on life, God Pharaoh's statue is one of the go-tos to prolong the game and stretch it out so that you're not as dead as quick. And being able to plus on it and make a 6/6 can close games. Lots of different ways to, one, prolong the game, but close it out once you get Karn on the battlefield. But you got to survive until then.
I think that's definitely a very, very cool build. I like God Pharaoh statue. I have played against it once when I was actually playing Blue Light Control. It was kind of the funniest game because we played so long that my opponent cast it, and then I was like, okay, end step, quicken, had to pay the extra, and then I planar cleansing, also paying the extra.
Yeah.
Just wiping all planeswalkers plus God Pharaoh's statue. So, I mean, not forgetting the fact that I had to just pay 11 mana to cast that, which was kind of funny, but, you know, it was one of those plays where my opponent just stands there just like...
What?
Yeah, when you go for when you just planar cleansing instant speed, paying 11 mana, that is one of the more funny ones.
Oh, yeah. No, that is definitely a what just happened sort of moment.
Yeah.
But I didn't really do all that well in the Pioneer qualifier rounds, mainly due to my inexperience with the format. This deck is not as easy as you would think to pilot, especially when the luck is not for you. Sometimes Storm the Festival looks at 5 cards and then puts 2 lands into play, and you're like, oh. Navigating those games where you don't have as good a luck is just as important as being able to smash the games that you don't have luck. And this deck has a lot going for it to keep it from succumbing to that with the grinding through the deck with Oath of Nissa and Storm the Festival, but sometimes you end up in the interactive spot where they've taken those things away from you and you're just not quite able to get there. 21 lands is also a pretty big influence on that.
You think that's a lot or too, like, not that much?
I think it's a good number considering the kind of deck this is, but if things aren't going well, it is too few.
Okay.
Llanowar Elves and Elvish Mystic pick up a lot of mana production slack, especially since we're trying to get to 6 mana with Storm the Festival.
Yeah, also you got Oath of Nissa finding new lands, so I can see the argument on that, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean it can stumble, but navigating the games where you stumble is the important part of playing in that format, and I have not got enough experience to have pulled off a qualifying effort. But I definitely do recommend this moving forward, even with the new addition of Liliana to the format. I think this deck definitely has a good chance of surviving a Liliana format.
Do you think it's just because it just is able to top deck quite well? Because Liliana usually comes down to a very good top decking game.
Absolutely, especially when you get later into the game. If you can get your mana production online, and that's easier to do against Liliana style decks because you can leverage your old growth trolls. In that way, you can use Sylvan Caryatid since it has hexproof and the Wolf Willow Haven. You're not going to be able to easily rely on your Elvish Mystics or your Llanowar Elves because those sorts of decks are going to have the removal spells to get through those. But Wolf Willow and Old Growth Troll are going to be able to keep your mana production moving well even through the sacrifice effects and the discard effects of Liliana. So you're going to be able to rip those Storm the Festivals and those Cavalier of Thorns to be able to get through there. And there are a lot of cards in Pioneer that are green that'll be good against Liliana anyway. But yeah, I definitely recommend this deck moving forward. I found it through Corey Baumeister, who is, you know, world-renowned talent in the Magic world. I found it through his Patreon, so I have to give him a shout-out for his work and what he's doing to provide strategy content for those of us out there. So shout out to him. Thank you. But yeah, this is a good deck moving forward, I think, in the Pioneer format, and something that I think everyone should look into.
Yeah, I very much like the list. I think it's a great list.
I think that's a pretty good spot. We're at a solid amount of time. We could put a finisher on this. Do you have a Snake Eyes Asks that we want to ask?
I mean, Snake Eyes do be having some questions, so I have a very important, you know, since we've been talking about big events, and you know, I'm not talking about, you know, a two-headed giant draft with your brother or, you know, sister or who knows, whatever. What major event is coming up for you, or what major event did you go to? And you know, if you did go to one, just let us know how it went, and did you do great? How you think it was? And we would love to hear how your major events that are coming up or have been were, because you know, since COVID is taking, you know, we are getting less and less restrictions. I'm super curious to hear how you guys.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the best things about Magic is, in fact, the gathering. So
oh yeah,
sharing those stories is absolutely awesome. So hit us up in the comments section. Don't forget to like this video if you enjoyed it. Subscribe to us. We're trying to put out a lot more content in the future. So yeah, I think we got to put a good button on this. Scratch, you want to sign us out?
Yes, I'm going to say have a good night or good day, whatever time it is for you guys, and see you around.
All right, folks. Take it easy.